Welcome to the Sports Tech HQ podcast, the show where we dive into the latest innovations that are shaping the future of sports. I'm Brian Alkire, your host today, and I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Allison Barber, chair of the Marvella Foundation. Allison has a remarkable background, and I don't use that word lightly. She entered the workforce as a grade school teacher right here in Indiana, but it wasn't long before she pivoted into PR and communications and was later tapped for roles at the Pentagon and White House. She returned home as the founding chancellor of WGU Indiana and most recently served as the president of WNBA's Indiana Fever. That's just part of her career that has clearly been filled with big moves and bold decisions. And today, we're excited to talk with her about the next one. Allison and her team are spearheading one of the most ambitious women's sports projects in the United States, with an exciting announcement coming just today tied to sports tech. Allison, we're thrilled you're here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
So let's start with Marvella and the project that you've launched, I believe, last fall, right? Tell us about what it is and why you're starting here in Indiana.
Well, we're thrilled to be a part of this team to create the country's first girls' sports and leadership experience. And we've named it Marvella because of Senator Birch Bayh's wife, Marvella, was not able to go to college because there was no Title IX. And so he was inspired to pen Title IX, which gave girls, for the first time ever, access to federal funding to go to college and other activities, which then went on to, of course, include sports scholarship. And so this campus is going to be an interactive, immersive, wonderful campus using sports of all types. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. And also building a success center that helps build out the whole being of a girl and giving them a great pathway to success. And we think that the name Marvella is exactly perfect because, one, she inspired Title IX, and two, Indiana is the birthplace of Title IX, and that's why we've called it Marvella. I
think that's an awesome touch. I know we're both so proud of what Indiana's done as a trailblazer for the sports industry as a whole, and certainly now in sports tech. Mm-hmm. So talk to us. We're going to get back into, obviously, I think what's fascinating to me about Marvella is it's more than just a sports facility. Yeah. And so we'll get to the leadership and components. But from just a logistics standpoint, what sports are you focusing in on? What is kind of the demographic of young women and girls that you're focusing in on? Kind of paint the picture of what the project looks like.
Sure. So Marvella will be located up by Fair Oaks Farms. We have 110 acres. And we will build out an athletic and training facility with indoor basketball, volleyball, and multi-purpose courts indoors. Outside, we'll have fields for both softball, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, rugby, and flag football, which, as you know, will be a new Olympic sport in 2028. Yes. And so we will tap into, this is phase one. It can develop into additional sports, track and field, golf, tennis, as we go along. But for now, this is the focus because this is where girls are playing sports and where we want to tap into giving them an experience built just for them. Brian, the girls that we're going to attract are ages 8 to 18. It's never been done before. Everything that we're doing, the design of the buildings, the fields, the locker rooms, the private space, the community space, all designed with a firm specifically focused, architect firm that's focused specifically on designing for girls and women. And this is part of our differentiation of, doing it right for girls. And we're excited about that.
Wow. So tell us about, obviously this is located, just for context for those not familiar with Indiana, it's about 2 hours north of Indianapolis, but also very close to Chicago, right?
Yeah, we put it there on purpose. One, we have a great partnership with Mike and his family who own Fair Oaks Farms. Our land it's connected to the farm. So imagine this. The idea is we're 100 miles north of Indy, 70 miles south of Chicago, but there are, about 2 million girls in the 3-hour drive space that are playing sports. We're going to create this environment. It's going to be a destination, which we are pretty excited about because it's what we like to do in Indiana. But imagine if you play travel ball, you'll come for your tournament. Maybe your team plays at 9 in the morning and not again until 4 in the afternoon. We've created an environment for families and girls that they can go and explore the farm, the museums, go see the bison, go watch a cow being born, go to our success center and do some fun learning around cooking and, sports physiology for girls. So all of a sudden, we've taken what is typically a long weekend for families that they have the games and then they go shopping or just hang out, spend time on their phones.
Figure out what to do in whatever town they're in.
That's right. And so what we're designing is really this destination attraction for the girls, for their teams, and for their families to come in. And we feel great about that type of environment. And it seems just right for Indiana, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We think about everyone, not just the tournament, not just the play, but also the culture that we're building around that.
Okay, so obviously between the games, let's focus in on what's happening there from a leadership perspective.
Sure.
And, we've met with your team a number of times and heard your pitch, which is so inspiring to hear, where really it feels like there's a void in what's happening for, yes, obviously you'll cater to, I imagine, top-tier premier athletes who maybe are trying to pursue a career in athletics professionally. But that's the 1%, right? And so how are you guys impacting the 99% in that as well?
Yeah, so now you're really going to get me going. So I'm a first grade school teacher. I taught grade school for 6 years in Maryville, Indiana. So Marvella's in Northwest Indiana, my homeland area. But what I've learned from my very first career is a few things in this space. Number one, if you want to help kids academically, physically, they have to be active. It's, 3 in 5 girls right now in America are dealing with depression. CDC says one of the things you can do to mitigate depression is get kids to be active. So I'm looking at it through the lens of how do we really help develop girls at the youngest of ages, 8. You've got to get these tools built into their behavior early. So you have 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds and you're saying it's good to be active. And being active helps you with your health. It helps you with your academics. Kids who play sports have better grades. And it helps you with your mental health, which is really critical and part of our big focus at Marvella. And so for young children, being active is important. For mid-teenage girls, I think about their future. 94% of women who work in C-suite positions in America, 94% of those women played sports.
Wow.
So I look.
Hold on a second.
Thank you.
That's a
Ernst
real
and Young research.
Wow.
Ernst and Young research.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go really fun about this. The woman who commissioned that work for Ernst and Young was Beth Brooke, who went to Purdue. She was the first female basketball scholarship given at Purdue was to Beth Brooke, who went on to be a top executive at Ernst & Young, who commissioned this work.
Wow.
So, it's kind of a fun Indiana story too, isn't it?
Wow. So I imagine somebody like that might end up, I know you have a museum that's also going to be tied to this. Talk a little bit about that. And what else at the facility? You have scholarships, right?
We have scholarships. So it's the tournament play. We'll attract teams from all over. Our focus is Midwest, but we have already heard from teams on the East Coast that want to book our fields for lacrosse. And so we think it'll be a bigger play. We'll build 4 other facilities around the country. Indiana will always be the flagship, Marvella, because the demand is there. We're working with people at Aspen Institute who are just challenging us, both in the area of how we design the game and the experience, what technology we use, challenging us to think about taking a whiteboard and putting girls at the center of your focus. And how would you design the game, the experience, the technology for girls? Instead of what we've inherited, which makes sense, is that most of what we have is designed for boys and men, and we adapt it for girls. What if we say, let's imagine something different, design it, and build it for girls first? So this will be an attraction in Indiana and around the country. But then we'll also have scholarships because we want to really make sure we're making this available to as many girls as possible. And so we have a nonprofit that will run our institute, and we'll have a sports science institute as part of Marvella. How do we study the physiology of girls? That's different than boys. And how do we teach coaches to coach girls based on their physiology? How do we help parents look for signals around the health and wellness and well-being for their daughters? So you can imagine that this is why I say it's really, how do we focus on the whole girl, not the sports? Sometimes that's the hook. Yeah. It's fun playing sports, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't love it?
Yeah.
They come to play sports. They leave a better person because of Marvella.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about it, and I think
you got me going.
I know
you were going to get me going.
And I know we have some exciting things to share. We'll get to about sports tech, which I can. There's obviously some tea leaves that we're dropping about. Obviously, the connection that we can have. I think just about this whole project through your lens. So most recently, and again, for the listeners out there, we will bookmark. I dropped some teases of your CV earlier in the intro, and we will get back to that because I think I could do 30 full minutes just on your career and how you've ended up where you're at. But I look at it through your lens. Most recently, you were the president of the Indiana Fever.
Yes.
And I'm sure throughout your career, a number of opportunities come to you, ideas to start something. And I can tell just through your passion about this clearly won you over. Talk about, how you were approached, how you got involved, and why you felt like this was the right time.
Yeah, it was a privilege to be the president of the Fever and watch the rebuild and the energy of our city and state and country and beyond now coming on board around the wonderful game of the basketball in the WNBA. What a privilege to be on the team during that transition and really transformational time. Some of my takeaways were, first and foremost, watching girls be inspired by the game of basketball because of our Fever players. And Caitlin has taken the visibility to a whole new level. Yeah. Her passion is youth, so it made sense that kids, and she was really committed to developing the youth around this game of basketball. But from my seat, I realized that there's more to be done to help girls at a younger age. By the time athletes come to the WNBA, they're professional athletes. They either have the skills they need or they don't. They have the team around them or they don't. They're professionals. What if we took the roadmap and brought it down to 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds to say, if you want to be a professional in sports, maybe you're going to play, maybe you'll be a broadcaster, maybe you'll be a coach or a trainer. At Marvella, we're going to have a broadcast studio teaching girls how to be sports broadcasters. So you just want to be in the space of sports. We've got to start that conversation younger and earlier with girls and give them that immersive experience. So what I learned was that there's more to do for girls at a younger age. And then this momentum is important. I'm a big time believer. If you don't maximize momentum, you lose it. And there are some people who don't see that path the same way that I see it. But if you do some research, the first company to sponsor a female athlete happened in 1920. And then it didn't happen again until 1970. So what happened? It lost the momentum. So we have to maximize this momentum right now. It's an important time. It's really unprecedented. And we've got to maximize it to do more for girls.
There's been an unbelievable amount of eyeballs. Obviously, you mentioned Caitlin Clark, the Fever. They've kind of been at the forefront of that in the last, year and a half, 2 years. I think about, from your perspective, I mean, it's not just been a year and a half and 2 years. It's been decades in the making.
That's right.
A lot of work. And I know that, Indiana has long been, go all the way back to Title IX, like you mentioned earlier, has long been associated with that. But there have been some overnight changes, and from a business perspective, maybe. Sure. I mean, just in popularity. Obviously, the work was put in for a long time, but all of a sudden, there's been overnight, popularity, profitability, I imagine, and a lot of numbers. What did you see when you were at the Fever, and how are you kind of taking that to Marvella and trying to leverage that, kind of like you mentioned?
Well, what you really find is there are partners, sponsors, fans that they see the alignment now. It's clearer, and sometimes it takes time. This is technology. I don't need to tell you. You have these founders and innovators, but it takes a while for something to be socialized and practiced by the common people and, more population. So that's what we see in sports too. All of a sudden, people are now doing research. You can't expect people to make decisions without data. Now there is data. Companies who sponsor women's sports has a higher propensity. Fans will buy that product more than if they sponsor a men's sport. Data matters. And there's research now that gives confidence to partners and sponsors to say, well, this is a good investment because I'll get a return on my investment and I will do something good for society and for the community. But we have to be smart business people. Data matters.
Yes, absolutely. All right, I want to pivot a bit to sports tech. Okay. This is the Sports Tech HQ podcast, and because we were introduced, and I know between myself and Jeff and our team, we saw a lot of synergies based on the last 15 minutes of this conversation of what sports tech and I'm surely something that you've been tapped into going all the way back to the Fever. Sure. But excited today to announce that Sports Tech HQ will be the official innovation partner for Marvella, and hopefully take advantage of really the ecosystem that we're also growing. There's one, if we look back to the Indiana Sports Corps, there's, pillars looking ahead for the next, 2050 vision, and both women's sports and sports tech are really important priorities in Indiana. And so excited that we could combine those. And looking ahead, something, sports tech, surely at the Fever, you were, tapped into and watching. It's been a massively growing industry and something that we've been harnessing here in Indiana. So we're excited to take advantage of I think we have 37 now, announced a new one yesterday.
Congrats.
37 companies that are here in Indiana building and innovating sports tech. And so I know we're excited to connect and innovate. Why was it so important for you guys at Marvella to seek out and make sure that, the latest innovations as far as sports tech were included in what you guys are building?
Well, we're thrilled with this partnership. We're announcing it today because today is National Girls and Women in Sports Day. And what a perfect, exciting time to say, it goes back to the whiteboard. How do we reimagine and design and create a pathway for girls that's designed specifically for them? And that includes everything from the architecture of our facility at Marvella to the technology. What technology is out there that will help girls in their own training and their health and their fitness and their diets around living their best life? And there's a play there for technology. It might already be created. We might need to create it together. And we're excited about that because it gives kids more tools in their toolbox, and their parents and their coaches those same tools. That's all done through technology. We've seen this huge rise in technology in sports, of course. Everything from AI and video playback and, wearables, all of that. We want to make sure we're designing and partnering with Sports Tech HQ to find the best innovators that really are focused on girls and their success.
Awesome. I know we had a number of conversations already and thinking of a number of folks in our collective who make obvious fit. I think what's fascinating is generally, we work with any kind of tech company that is obviously producing technology for fans, for athletes, or teams. And generally, there's one bucket that a partner will fit into. I think what's fascinating about Marvella is that because of the Institute, because of what you guys are trying to build outside of the game itself, from a broadcast angle, from a fan engagement angle, there's really a ripe opportunity for a lot of our companies to get involved and see how we can integrate and help create technology. I think back to another thing that we've heard, anecdotally from a lot of the different partners that we interface with. It's that, particularly for women and girls who are, we think about the India Ignite and you think about the Indiana Fever, we're trying to apply technology that was largely built for men's sports to women leagues, teams, and athletes. And I think that there needs to be research done, both from all the way from fans, athletes, and teams to how we can better tailor technology that's designed specifically for women and girls.
Yes, specifically for, I really think a lot around the physiology because we've watched coaches try to coach girls the same way they coach boys, and the physiology is different. And that sounds, it's broad, but there's actual research and data to substantiate what we're saying. And we believe technology can help everyone do a better job in the coaching development and the future for girls.
Awesome. Well, I told the audience we'd get back to this, and I want to touch a little bit back on your background and history and how you ended up here at Marvella, because it's a fascinating story. I was looking, through a lot of the different interviews you've done over the years at different stages of your career, and you must have a one-of-one career. There's not many people that have taken the steps that you have and had the experiences all in one linear path. I took this. I'm going to read this from one of your bios, but you've successfully gone from a schoolhouse to the White House and then to a field house in Bankers or now in Cambridge, field house. So I'd like to, and that obviously that's just an alliteration that includes three things. I'm sure you can fill in a couple more blanks. Help me see how you've been able to take from one experience to the next in different industries, in higher education, in sports now, going all the way back to being in defense and politics. How have you evolved and taken every experience with you, and how are you taking that now to Marvella?
When I was the chancellor of WGU Indiana, our whole model is built on competencies. You've learned something today that will help you. You can use those competencies for something tomorrow in your next opportunity. And one of the provost said to me, Allison, when you started riding a bike, you put training wheels on the bike. But when your parents bought you a bigger bike because you got taller, you didn't put training wheels on that bike. You already were competent in balance. And that made great sense to me, that I look at my career and say, what did I learn from teaching what competencies did I build in that space that helped me in each career? So every career builds on the next career. It's a pathway that I find great energy and excitement through, of saying, how do you take on big challenges, identify immediately what the goals are, how do you build a team around that? It's what we did at the Pentagon. You build the right team for the certain challenge in front of you, and then you move out and execute the goal against the goal. But you have to have the right team around you. And that's what it was. Tamika Catchings who said to me, she and I worked together at the Fever, and she said, Allison, I'm helping out this project, Marvella, would you come talk to me and talk to the team about what we're doing? And so any chance I have to work with Tamika is always a winner. And then when I understood the mission of doing something that's never been done before, that's like my love language, so WGU had never been done before in Indiana. Those things, it excites me to take on tough challenges that at the end, if you do it right, will really help people. That's a good day. And to do it with Tamika and the team around us, with Julie and Glenn and Lou, all the team at Marvella, is really exciting.
You have a really fantastic team that we're excited to get to work with.
Thank
We're
you.
equally as passionate, I have to say, which is
Yes.
always great to have. So I go back, and this there's a bit of a parallel potentially to founders who, many founders are multi-time founders, right?
Yes.
They pivot from one industry
Yes.
to another, from one product to another. And I always think we all look back at our careers, and there's different stages. And sometimes it takes time to look back and realize what you learned and what was, potentially, a key factor in building your experience or your understanding of something. And it takes maybe 10 years for you to go back and realize. So I go back, and you have two, experiences that just stand out, which is being in Washington, D.C., both for the Pentagon and the White House. If you look back at those, first of all, how did you get into those two?
Yeah.
How did you go from ultimately teaching into PR, and what led you there? And then do you look back at any of those experiences now and pull anything from that?
Oh, all the time, sure. And the reason I've been able to pivot, and I pivot about every 6 years to do different career, not job. I like to change careers.
Really?
And yes.
Intentionally?
Yes.
Wow. Sorry to interrupt. That's fascinating.
Yes. So I like it.
When did you make that decision to start doing that?
It actually happened organically. So I was teaching school. My husband was practicing law. The first Gulf War broke out, and my husband came home and said he wanted to serve the country. So we both quit our jobs, and he joined the Army, and I had to find a new career, a new job. I didn't want to go back to teaching. I taught for 6 years. I wanted something different. So organically, I reinvented myself the first time, and then I've done it strategically since. Because it suits my personality of taking on challenges which are exciting to me. It wouldn't be for everyone, and that's okay too. But for the founders, I think about, what have I learned along the way? What do I pull from? You pull out of, when you work at the Pentagon and at the White House, you realize that, you have there's small room for error. You're on the world stage, and the work you do every minute of every day is critical and important, and especially at the Pentagon for our troops and their families. The purpose of that job had deep meaning, and so you had to outwork even your own goals because the mission was critical. And my mission wasn't equal to the soldiers. I'm not comparing that, but my mission was critical to do what I could, and we all did, to support our military and their families. And so when you work in an environment that's so mission focused, that sticks with you. And you're always want to take on another mission, not a job, but a mission. And Marvella has a mission that matters. And so that's what gives us energy.
Awesome. Okay, last question, one more piece of advice to any of the founders watching this, listening to this. As we evolve and as women's sports is going to continue, it's on a trajectory that is really exciting and well-deserved after a lot of work from a lot of people. And as we start to think about technology that is designed specifically for women, for girls at any age, is there any advice you would have for how you, just from your experience at the Fever and now at Marvella, that you would look to and advise them on what types of things you've seen that may just previously wasn't a fit and was thought with in a silo potentially for a certain sport or a certain gender that might help them capture a market that clearly is going to be consistently expanding?
Sure, I would focus a lot on nutrition. Those are big buckets, but how do you measure your nutrition? How do you track what you need to eat, when you need to eat it? There's some groups in technology already focused on that. That would be a gift to society in general for kids. That's the goal of Marvella, is we'll do it through sports, but these are tools that kids will take with them through their life. And so nutrition is critical for success. The work we're doing in mental health, that's important and critical. So any kind of immersive technology, we're not going to try and get kids to spend more time on their phones necessarily when that's oftentimes what's causing the distress. But what are some big ideas around VR and technology and AI that could help bring that strength to girls in particular? And then we think about just the physiology. This is a big area for girls to really break it down into areas that kids can understand. Some of the technology I've seen is so advanced that it misses the mark a little for a 12-year-old, but that's okay. It's a start. And then how do you break it down so it makes sense to young children? It's the training wheels on their bike. Give me some technology that gives them training wheels so that they can move to the next technology that they've already established their balance.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It's a great conversation. Learned so much. Excited to launch our partnership, and I'm sure we'll have many updates along the way. To our listeners, feel free to stay tuned to Marvella's updates on our website, sportstechhq.com. Thank you for tuning into this episode. And if you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. And remember, stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore another exciting innovation in the world of sports tech.